It's Friday, another week has come and gone, and you're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Tim Dennis will be back with me on Monday when we dip into paranormal stories and supernatural news, and I have it on good authority. He's going to be with me for quite a few episodes next week. It's been a long time since we've been able to work together in studio, but we are back next week. So please make sure you tune in, and thank you for all the loving emails, letters, and contact Tim. It means a lot to him. He is slowly rebuilding and should be doing well here in another couple of weeks. So they're saying that he should be up and around walking again by August, so that's great news, and we'll talk more with Tim on Monday. All right, tonight it's time to revisit with some of our friends. I think they were with us back in, I think it was January or February this year, talking about one of their books, and these two are busy. They've constantly got things popping up. Beyond Strange is the new book, True Tales of Alien Encounters and Paranormal Mysteries. They're back with us this evening. Trish MacGregor is the Edgar Award-winning author of 42 novels, mystery and science fiction, and of numerous nonfiction books on synchronicity, the tarot, dreams, and astrology. Her most recent nonfiction book is The Biggest Book of Horoscopes Ever, and Unlocking the Secrets to Scorpios. She also has co-authored with her husband Rob MacGregor, Aliens in the Backyard, UFO Encounters, Abductions, and 7 Secrets of Synchronicity and the Other Side. Rob MacGregor is an Edgar-winning author, so he's no slacker either. He's also been on the New York Times bestseller list, show off. He is the author of 19 novels, 14 nonfiction books, and is teamed with the likes of George Lucas. I think that guy's going to do okay someday. Peter Benchley and Billy D. Williams. He writes both adult and young adult mysteries, adventures, and science fiction fantasy. He's best known for his 7 Indiana Jones novels. Among his nonfiction books are Psychic Power, Bump in the Night, Ghosts, Spirits, and Alien Encounters, and Meditation for Busy Minds. He also co-authored Beyond the Bermuda Triangle with Bruce Gernon. That's coming out a little bit later this month, and we will be featuring a little bit of Bruce's story today in Theater of the Mind. It is great to have you back with us. Trish, thank you for being here this evening.
Well, thank you. It's fun. You're always fun, Dave.
Well, thank you. And Rob, thank you again for taking time out of your busy writing schedule to join us again.
No problem. Enjoy it.
Good to have you here. Now, this, I've got to ask you a quick question, Trish, if you don't mind, before we dig into the new book. So you've got a brand new book, The Biggest Book of Horoscopes Ever, and Unlocking the Secrets to Scorpios. So can you explain something to me? What is a cusp, and how do you decide which person or which sign you fall under? I was born on November 22nd. So,
oh, no, you're one of those, huh?
Yeah, I know. 1122 power numbers, baby. But I'm also a Scorpio Sagittarius or a Saggicorpius or a Scorpitagius, whatever you want to call it. How do you decide which angle you come at? I mean, when I was growing up.
Do you have your right time of birth?
I don't remember. At like 8:16 in the morning or something.
Yeah. Okay, well, people who are born on the cusp between two signs, that just means, like, for you, you're actually part Sagittarius and part Scorpio. Only you know which part dominates, or your friends,
okay,
or your family.
I got you. Now, unlocking the secrets of Scorpios. What are the big secrets? I guess I didn't know I had any.
Well, you're secretive. That's the first one.
Don't talk about it.
Scorpios are also the most intuitive signs in the zodiac.
You were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
See? It's very predictable.
It is.
It's telling me that you're really a Scorpio.
And astrology, this is still something. Yeah, I grew up in Chicago, so I would look in the Sun Times for the one and the Tribune for the other, because I was a Scorpio in one, a Sagittarius in the other, and always read them. But I also found myself, when I would read other people's horoscopes. I'm like, hey, I sound like a Cancer today. I sound like a Gemini. Wait a minute. There's such generalizations. Do you think that too many people skirt and do too many generalizations when it comes to astrology?
Yeah, I think they do, especially people who do newspaper horoscopes, because they have to do them daily. And I think it's the problem is that the only way you can get an accurate readout is to have your natal chart done. And for that, you need your time of birth. Otherwise, they just take your sun sign and put it at the ascendant on the rising sign and look at the houses and the transits that are occurring and the angles it makes to your sun.
And, this all sounds like hippie stuff to me, right? I mean,
it is hippie stuff.
Right.
That's where it started.
You're in the Aquarius, man. Your Uranus is in the moon of Scorpio, and leave my Uranus out of it. But how do you?
Okay,
is there a real science to?
Chart.
Okay, is there a real science to astrology, or is it intuitive, more intuitive than it is a science?
I think it's both. You've got to know the basics. You have to know what a square means, what the different angles are to the different planets, what each planet means, what the houses mean. So there's a science in that sense, but it's also intuitive because if you look at a chart as just, it's a flat sheet of paper with a bunch of symbols on it, and you have to basically pour yourself into the chart and figure out who the person is.
It's a divination system.
Yeah, it's also divination.
Well, wasn't there some kind of shenanigans going on a few years back where they were adding a 13th astrological character?
Somebody, when we were doing the Sidney Elmore books, the editor said, well, why don't you write us something on this 13th planet? I said, I don't know anything about this 13th planet. Astrology is what it is, and it's got, the planets and the sun and the moon and, the 13th planet. Sorry.
How far back does astrology go? I mean, is there a pinpoint we can say, hey, look, this is all the way back to, biblical times or even earlier?
Well, I think it goes back earlier. I guess you could say, like the I Ching, for instance, is over 5,000 years old in terms of a divination system and a philosophy. And astrology is at least that old.
All right. Rob, are you a sneaky, shady Scorpio like me? Is that why she had to write a whole book about you?
I'm just the other end of the spectrum of the horoscope. I'm a Taurus. I'm
so
6 signs away from you.
Yeah, I'm full of bull. Rages like a bull, too.
Is it, and I don't mean to beat this angle to a death here, but I'm curious about this, especially from somebody that's so focused on the astrology. Do people, I hear people say, oh, I totally live up to this. And, even my own beloved, she'll send me these, look, this fits exactly my personality. And I read it and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's good. But what did 14 other astrologers say about you today? Did they say the same thing? Is it generalized? That's where I have trouble understanding. Cause I can honestly tell you, out of all the years I read my horoscope, I never met that mystery person. I never found the missing key. There was never a $20 bill hidden in my back pocket. There was never anything that these astrology, predictions would tell me about.
Right. The dailies are, very generalized. I mean, you got to think that each one of the signs has to represent 1/12 of humanity. And is everybody taking that bus trip?
No.
Do you look at things too, like when you
if
look
you
at
send me your birth data, I'll do a birth chart for you, and I'll interpret it. This is an offer, and then I will prove to you that it works.
All right. Well, if you come back with you're a bald, mildly successful radio show host, I'm not going to be impressed because that's, I give you credit for calling me mildly successful, but I'll take it. What about like the Chinese charts? The year of the monkey, the year of the donkey, the year of the cobra. Does that play into effect as well? Can you look at multi-layers of these things?
For me, I'm basically a Western astrologer. I honestly, Chinese astrology is so complicated that I think you have to be Oriental to understand it. It's a cultural thing.
Sure.
It really is. So
I was just curious if we ever looked at these like layers. Do they ever, lay over one another? I mean, you could do the astrological charts every day for, these 12 different signs, but then if we look at the year of our birth on top of it, do we get even more kind of intrinsic information by looking at the different belief systems out there?
I suspect some astrologers who do both Western and Chinese astrology do get additional information. And now a lot of astrologers are starting to use they've been doing it for a long time, the asteroids. And there's one guy who you really should have on your show. His name's Alex Miller. He does asteroid astrology that is so mind-boggling and so accurate that I was just blown away when I read an article he did in Mountain Astrologer. And now he has his own website, and he focuses on politics. For instance, did you know that there's an asteroid called Trumpo?
Is it big and gassy and just continues to burn? Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, well,
puts out an orange light. Is that true too?
Exactly. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh God. All right. Stop. You don't have to email me, folks. It was just a simple jab. I'm not. If it was, no matter who would be the president, I'd take a shot right now, just as mockery and social joking. It's not me against the world or the politics. So just stop emailing and think happy thoughts. Let's get back into this new book, Beyond Strange: True Tales of Alien Encounters and Paranormal Mysteries. You guys have written many books that have covered different topics like this. How many stories do you guys get a year?
We get a lot of emails from people, and
part of it is that people know we're interested and that we're writers and that we can write about their stories.
Yeah, and they're willing to tell us their stories because, and we often put them up on our blog, synchrosecrets.com, and we're willing to let them tell their story, even though they can't prove it to us that it's definitely accurate, it definitely happened, but we give them the chance, and then people come on the blog and we can discuss it and ask them more questions about it, but we're not attacking people.
Yeah, and also we don't say, okay, you have to prove this to us, or you have to, give us proof that you were actually there. And a lot of these people don't have anybody to talk to about these kind of experiences.
Right. So you're not investigators so much. You're just historians and storytellers.
In a sense.
Right. So these people don't have to provide you with photographic evidence. I mean, if they have it, that's great. But you're more of the collectors of these histories. That's great. When you're going through these stories, and you guys have done a lot of books, are there any stories that you look at and you think, no, I'm not putting that in the book?
Well, I don't think we've ever run across one. I mean, we've run across a lot of strange stuff. And when it's really strange, we ask for more information, more detail.
Yeah, we have one story in this book that gets a little graphic. It's an out-of-body experience story that ends up with some levitation sex involved when he meets another person out of body, which is kind of strange.
Well, you can't gloss over it, Rob. Now I need a little bit more detail, and just explain it slow and let me close my eyes. Wait, now, go on. Tell me this story. I'm sure now that the listeners' curiosity have been piqued, and mine as well. What happened?
Okay, this is a man who had kept a secret from his fellow co-workers. He's a police officer in Central Texas and since the age of 12 he had out-of-body experiences, and at first when he had his first experience he got very excited and told his parents about it and his brother about it, and they just put him down and said, that's crazy, you're just dreaming. And he said, no, I was awake when this happened. I was floating and I saw my body underneath me. And these experiences continued for him, but he stopped talking with his parents. And then as he became an adult and became a police officer, he had this whole secret life of these experiences that he was traveling all over. He told me one story where he went into a topless bar and actually was able to flick the waitress's shorts from behind and actually pulled them partially down, and she dropped a whole tray of drinks. And he was very embarrassed by that. He said, "Please don't put that in the book."
No, just tell me and my 250,000 closest friends, Rob. It's all safe. Just staying between friends. And this guy's name was what?
You have to read the book.
He actually uses his name too. He's coming out. He used he was on the internet for a while and used a different name, but now he doesn't care anymore, and he's just telling it all. And so this experience with the astral sex took place on a journey to the Akashic record, and he had heard about this place of stored knowledge that you could travel to. That's like a mansion. Interdimensional.
Typical man, right? We're on our way to a really important thing, and we got to stop for sex halfway through.
Yeah, really?
We can't even astral project and not think about sex every 12 minutes. That's crazy.
Well, he got to this mansion, and he was floating above it, this vast pure white mansion with marble floors, and each rooms were about the size of a large hotel room, and each of them, they didn't have any furniture in, but they had a huge decorated vase or urn, and each one was distinct, and each one held your soul memories of past lives and future lives and everything about you. And he was floating up above, and then he was noticing other people floating up above, and then he came across this woman, and he came down to this bench, and this woman walked up to him. She appeared to be an older woman in her early 60s, attractive woman. But then he found out from her that a lot of people come in disguises there. And she was one of them. And she said, "Actually, I'm a little bit younger than you." And she immediately changed to a woman in her, I think, late 30s or early 40s, and a very attractive woman. And then he discovered that she wasn't wearing any clothes. And he realized that he wasn't wearing clothes. Then he wondered, did I know that I don't have any clothes? Is this always the case? He never looked down. And he realized that she wanted to merge.
Merge. Wow, you are an author. Look at you go. Keep it clean. I like that, Rob.
And they floated up above the mansion, and she was providing some interesting knowledge for him. And he said it was the most incredible experience of his life. There was nothing to compare. It was just they had these dual explosions that went on, and it.
Wow.
And so.
And then at the end, she popped back into her 65-year-old form and said, "No, I'm really 72." Stupid guy, right? Again, we're easily tricked. Who cares? Yeah. So they had. Well, was there other souls around? I mean.
Oh yeah, and he said then he's looking around and there's a whole bunch of people doing it, floating around. They're all having sex. So this is an unusual version of the Akashic record.
Yeah, it is.
But it's not that unusual for OBEs. Robert Monroe, in his book Journeys Out of Body, describes his sexual encounter with somebody.
Yeah.
So apparently it happens. Monroe didn't describe it in this kind of detail, though.
Right. Yeah. Wow. So out of body. I wonder if there's performance anxiety out of body as well.
It almost ended up in a divorce for him. He came home and wrote about it on his computer in a file, and one day his wife was using his computer and came upon this file that said out-of-body adventure. So she went into it, read this whole thing, and she was very upset about it. She felt that he had violated the marriage, and he said, "But I was out of body. I was in bed, but I was out of body. How could this be?" And she finally got over it, but he said it was a difficult spat for a few days between them.
What about you, Trish? If Rob came back from, the Akashic records, if that's what he's calling it, and said, "I had the most explosive sexual encounter," would that...
I would want to know with who.
with who? This guy calling himself Darkness Dave. It was the weirdest thing. Yeah, that's bizarre. So, astral sex. And now, did they explain, again, what just stands out to me as odd and funny about this story, which makes it even more, in a sense, believable to me, is that these spirits go there in disguise, right?
Yeah, so, isn't that weird?
Right,
why?
yeah.
You think you're there for knowledge and to, to tap into that part of the ethereal internet, and why would you be ashamed or trying to hide who you are?
That's weird.
Yeah, that's what he didn't understand either. But that was something that puzzled him, and I guess he got so involved in the sexual aspect of it that he didn't get around to asking that question.
Again, typical man. I'm not going to ask questions. Let's just do this thing. Can you keep the wig and sunglasses on, please? Oh, my goodness. So these are the kind of stories you get. Wow. No wonder you guys.
That's one of the wildest ones.
Beyond strange.
Yeah, that's definitely beyond strange. We hear a lot of alien encounters that seem very sexual in nature. The Stan Romanek story is out right now, the documentary about him on Netflix. And he basically, the way it sounds is that this guy is just kind of milked to seed the galaxy. And there are women that seem to have their eggs harvested, men that seem to be milked.
Right.
I mean, they made it all this way, and their reproductive issues,
Yeah, I don't know. That part of it has always confused me.
Well, I guess the concept is that they
create hybrids.
Yeah, they came to the end of their line in the biological sense, and there may be part robot and part biological, and they are in need of genetic material in order to
propagate the race.
Right. Yeah.
Well, let's kind of keep it in the romantic vein, if you don't mind. You've got a story about a young couple who just met. Why don't you tell me a little bit about this story?
That's a great one.
Yeah. Okay. The man. Let me just take a little pause.
John Murphy.
Yeah.
You should give him a little bit of. First of all, a little bit of past info.
Okay.
The Great Hurricane of 1780 was also known as Hurricane San Calixto, or the Great Hurricane of the Antilles, and the 1780 disaster. So this plays into the story he's about to tell you.
Right, yeah.
In Bermuda.
Yeah, John Murphy, he was stationed aboard a U.S. Coast Guard cutter, and on Thanksgiving of 1964, he docked in St. George, Bermuda. And so he and three buddies went into town, St. George, and went to a bar, and they happened to just synchronistically meet four student nurses in the U.S. Navy Nurse Corps who were also there, who had flown in for the weekend. And so John kind of teams up with one of them, and
Barbara.
Yeah, Barbara, and they go take a walk on the beach. They separate from the others, take a walk on the beach, and they sit on this wall for a while and just get to know each other a bit. And then they go for another walk.
But before this, they also acknowledge that they feel like they know each other.
They had a sense. She wouldn't normally do this, go off with a strange man like this, but she had a very sense of knowing and a sense of being secure with him. So they found this path, this trail, and they followed it, and they had the odd sensation they were coming up over a hill that they would know that they knew what was on the other side of that hill. They thought there's going to be a little old English village here, and there's going to be a church
that dominates the square.
Right, dominates the square, and it's going to have a clock on it. Barbara said
on the steeple.
Yeah, on the steeple. And so they go over the hill, and there it is. There's this little village.
And she had also said the clock was going to be broken and would display 12:30, and that's what they saw.
And it did, yeah. So this is very strange. They walk into this village, but they don't see anybody. They walk around and just look around. They see like lantern lights in the houses, but they don't see any people. And they finally go over by a cemetery and sit on the wall for a while by the cemetery. Then she had a blanket with her because she had been to the beach with her friends earlier. They spread out the blanket and just laid down. And he was thinking, well, he wanted to get to know her a little better, right, intimately.
To merge, I think you call it.
No, they were both engaged to other people.
Yeah, here's the thing. Yeah, and they were both had other relationships going on. And so, he leaned over to kiss her, and oddly enough, they both passed out. They both fell asleep, and they woke up 2 hours later and very confused. Now,
another thing, though, that as they talked, both of them started recalling lives as a married couple with children, and they agreed they'd somehow met their deaths together in this village.
Yeah, it was
like a reincarnation.
It's kind of like a fantasy or something that they were having. So, but they were kind of embarrassed after waking up and just walked out of there. And he went back to the ship and she went back to her hotel. But she was leaving soon after that. He met her one more time and they just said their goodbyes and she left. And then he had a dream about this village, and he said he decided he wanted to go. He had another day left there, and so he wanted to go back to the village and just sit and write about his experience with her there and write all the stuff that they were thinking down. So he follows the path again, goes over the hill, and there's no village. It's just a field. And he looks, and am I on the wrong path? No, this was the right place. And there's just no village there. He's very puzzled. So he goes back into St. George, the town, and he goes into the bar and he starts asking questions about if there was ever any other village nearby here. And the bartender says, oh, yeah, the St. Catharines was a little village that was completely destroyed in the 1780 Great Hurricane that killed like 20,000 people in the Caribbean.
Wow.
As it swept through. And so then he was writing back and forth letters to the nurse, Barbara, but he didn't want her to think he's crazy, so he never told her that while they're writing that he gone back and the village wasn't there. But the bartender had told him there's an old captain here. You got to meet this old captain because his great grandparents, his ancestors lived in that village, and he's like the historian of that place. But the captain was in England on a trip, and so he didn't get a chance to talk to him. Then he was gone for several months, but then they came back again. The Coast Guard cutter came back again, and this time he found the old captain. And the captain took out pictures of his great-grandmother, and the great-grandmother looks exactly like Barbara. And he's just blown up. So now he's got to tell Barbara this story.
Sure.
So he's going to write a letter to her, but he gets a letter from her at first, and she says, "Don't ever write me again. I'm getting married. We have to cut this off. I'm sorry. It was nice to know you, but
the Dear John letter."
Yeah, the Dear John letter, and his name is John. So
irony.
So that was it. So years and years go by, and he remembers, this whole story. And so finally, like in, I think, 2008, when he's getting ready to retire, he became a corporate executive in I can't remember what industry it was in, some kind of communications. And so he was getting ready to retire, and he just decided he would try to find Barbara just to see if he could locate her. And he knew the name of the town in Wisconsin, where she had lived, and he started looking through the old newspapers there that were on the internet, and he found her wedding, and found what her new name was. And so he kept searching, and he finally found her and contacted her. And now it was time to tell her the story. And the first thing was, did she even remember any of this? And yes, she did remember, and she did remember the village. She remembered that they had sat on the stone wall by the cemetery, and that they had laid down and fallen asleep. And she remembered the church. And then he tells her, it's not there. And so...
and this was 52 years later.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
And so he's telling me all this stuff. And so I'm thinking, is he making this stuff up? And he says, I say, okay, give me her email address. I want to talk to Barbara. And so I contacted Barbara, and she verified this story, that this had happened, that she had been to that village. And she didn't remember all the details about the idea that they had lived there before like he did. He had, this whole memory of them talking about thinking that this had been a place that they had once lived. But she remembered the village, but she said when she was 19 at the time, she didn't have any concept of what past lives were or any reincarnation, anything like that. But now she does, and she's a believer. And then she says, and she accepts it now. And
also you didn't say that about how this guy's great grandparents had drowned. That was the big.
Right. Yeah. They had drowned in that hurricane. Oh. But she was pregnant. And the midwife found her the morning after the hurricane, and she was dead, but she was able to cut out the baby, and the baby survived, and that was why she had the great grandson who is the historian of that village.
Get out of here! That is fascinating.
Barbara is afraid of water.
Yeah, she's afraid of water.
Wow. You hear a story like that, and it just opens you up to a whole new concept of possibility.
It sure does.
And they're both very professional people and very straight-laced people, not the kind of people who would make up something like this. She's not only a nurse, but she's a lawyer.
Well, now lawyers are known to make a few things up, Rob.
Liars. But
let me ask you this real quickly, just so I have an understanding. When they found this town and this village, and they laid down, are you saying that village and town didn't exist? Were they in a time slip?
I think they walked back in time.
They walked back into time. Yeah. They're
fascinating.
And so I guess because of this connection they had emotionally, through a past life,
that they were able to. But he emphasized one thing to me. It wasn't just a fantasy that they were both experiencing. He said he touched the walls of the church and the walls along the cemetery and the building. So it seemed real to him. It was physical.
You know what? This is beyond strange. True tales of alien encounters and paranormal mysteries will continue with more Rob MacGregor, Trish MacGregor. But first, it's time to throw open the doors to the Darchives. We're going all the way back to 2006, when we were visited by a much younger Rob MacGregor and his friend Bruce Gernon as they share their story of the fog in Bermuda Triangle. This is Theater of the Mind. The Bermuda Triangle Electronic Fog Incident, told by Bruce Gernon. Bruce Gernon and his father had been flying in the Bahamas since 1967. And had made at least a dozen flights to and from Andros Island. Everything seemed normal on that fateful day in December of 1970, just after 3 p.m. when Bruce and his dad and a friend, Chuck Lafayette, a business associate, lifted off the runway at Andros Town Airport in a brand new Beechcraft Bonanza A36. What follows is Bruce Gernon's actual account. It was shortly after takeoff when I noticed an elliptical cloud directly in front of us, about a mile away, hovering at only about 500 feet above the ocean. It was a typical lenticular cloud, but I'd never seen one that low. Miami Flight Service reported over the VHF radio that the weather was good, so we continued. But the lenticular cloud quickly changed into a huge cumulus cloud. We were climbing at around 1,000 feet per minute, and the cloud seemed to be building up at the same rate. Unexpectedly, it caught up and engulfed our Bonanza. After about 10 minutes of climbing in and out of this cloud, the airplane finally broke free at 11,500 feet, and the sky was clear. I leveled the Bonanza off and accelerated to its maximum safe cruising speed of 195 miles per hour. When I looked back at the cloud, I was astonished. It now looked like an immense squall, abnormally shaped in the form of a giant semicircle extending around us. Visibility was about 10 miles, and the cloud continued beyond my perception, so it must have been more than 20 miles long. After a few minutes, I lost sight of it. Soon we noticed another cloud building directly in front of us, near the Bimini Islands. It looked a great deal like the cloud that we had just left, except that its top was at least 60,000 feet high. When we came within a few miles of it, we saw that it appeared to emanate directly from the surface of the Earth. Upon entering the cloud, we witnessed an uncanny spectacle. It became dark and black, without rain, and visibility was about 4 or 5 miles. There was no lightning bolts, only extraordinarily bright white flashes that would illuminate the entire surrounding area. The deeper we penetrated, the more intense the flashes became. So we made a 135-degree turn to the left and headed due south out of the cloud. We had been flying for 27 minutes. We thought we might be able to fly around the cloud, but after 6 or 7 miles, we saw that it continued in a near-perfect curve to the east. After 2 more minutes, it became apparent that the cloud near Andros and the cloud near Bimini were actually opposite sides of the same ring-shaped body. The cloud must have formed just off Andros Island and then rapidly spread outward into the shape of a donut with a diameter of around 30 miles. This seems impossible, but there was no other explanation. We were trapped inside a billowing prison with no way over or under it. 13 miles later, I noticed a large U-shaped opening in the west side of the donut cloud. I had no choice but to turn and try to exit through the opening. Now, as we approached, we watched the top ends of the U-gap join, forming a hole. The break in the cloud now formed a perfect horizontal tunnel, 1 mile wide and more than 10 miles long. We could see the clear blue sky on the other side. We also saw that the tunnel was rapidly shrinking. I increased the engine RPM, bringing our speed to the caution area of 230 miles per hour. When we entered the tunnel, its diameter had narrowed to only 200 feet. I was amazed at what the shaft now looked like. It appeared to be only a mile long instead of 10 plus as I had originally estimated. Light from the afternoon sun shone through the exit hole and made the silky white walls glow. The walls were perfectly round and slowly constricting. All around the edges were small puffs of clouds of a contrasting gray swirling counterclockwise around the plane. We were in the tunnel for only 20 seconds before we emerged from the other end. For about 5 seconds, I had the strange feeling of weightlessness and an increased forward momentum. When I looked back, I gasped to see the tunnel walls collapse and form a slit that slowly rotated clockwise. All of the electronic and magnetic navigational instruments began malfunctioning. The compass was slowly spinning even as the plane flew straight. I contacted Miami and told them that we're about 45 miles southeast of Bimini, heading east at 10,500 feet. The radar controller replied that he was unable to identify us anywhere in that area. Now, something bizarre happened. Instead of the blue sky we expected, everything was a dull, grayish white haze. Visibility seemed like more than 2 miles, yet we could not see the ocean, the horizon, or the sky. The air was very stable and there was no lightning or rain. I like to refer to this as an electronic fog because it seemed to be what was interfering with our instruments. I had to use my imagination to feel our way out west. We were in the electronic fog for 3 minutes when the controller radioed that he had identified an airplane directly over Miami Beach flying due west. I looked at my watch and saw that we had been flying for less than 34 minutes. We could not yet have reached Miami Beach. We should have been approaching the Bimini Islands. I told the controller that he must have identified another plane and that we were approximately 90 miles southwest of Miami and still looking for Bimini. Suddenly, the fog started breaking apart in a weird, sort of electronic fashion. Long, horizontal lines appeared in the fog on either side of us. The lines widened into slits about 4 or 5 miles long. We saw blue skies through them. The slits continued expanding and joined together. Within 8 seconds, all the slits had joined and the gray fog had disappeared. All I could see was brilliant blue sky as my pupils adjusted to the abrupt increase in brightness. Then, I saw the barrier island of Miami Beach directly below. After we landed at Palm Beach, I realized that the flight had taken a little less than 47 minutes. Now, I thought something must be wrong with the airplane's timer, yet all 3 of our watches showed that it was 3:48 p.m. I had never made it from Andros to Palm Beach in less than 75 minutes, even on a direct route. Our course on this flight was quite indirect and probably covered close to 250 miles. How could the airplane travel 250 miles in just 47 minutes? We taxied to customs, ending the fortuitous flight. We didn't talk about this for a long time. I could not logically understand what had happened during that flight, although I felt it was significant and reviewed it in my mind several times a day. In 1972, I heard about the so-called Bermuda Triangle and disappearances of boats and airplanes because of a possible time warp. It was then that I realized that time itself was the key. It should have taken about 4 minutes to travel through the tunnel, since it appeared to be about 10 to 15 miles long. Instead, this is precisely how long it took for us to leave the storm and reach clear skies. The remarkable thing is that we did not come out of the storm 90 miles away from Miami, as we should have. We had traveled through 100 miles of space and 30 minutes of time in a little more than 3 minutes.
Beyond the darkness.
And we're back. This is the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. All right, now you just got the chance to hear a really cool first-hand account. That was from Bruce Gernon, and he has co-authored a book which will be coming out later this month with Rob MacGregor, our guest, Beyond the Bermuda Triangle. And when will that book be available, Rob?
I believe it's going to be available July 23rd.
July 23rd, and you can get the entire story plus all of the rest of the great information that they put together for you in this. And we just gave you a very short version of that story, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. That's one of our favorites. We had Bruce and Rob on our show back in season 1, back in 2006. We did a small 36-minute episode with them. Now we'll be back in a couple of months and talk to both of these gentlemen again and go beyond the Bermuda Triangle. But tonight, we're beyond strange, that's for sure. True Tales of Alien Encounters and Paranormal Mysteries. That's the name of the new book by Rob and Trish MacGregor. All right, since we just did the story from Bermuda with the 2 reincarnated souls, and we just did the Bermuda Triangle story, and that had the weird electronic fog, talk to me about the 2 men on the golf course and that story that's in the new book as well.
And then I have a follow-up to that.
I'd love to hear. Great. Okay, let's begin.
Okay, so this story was provided me from a man named Hector Nunez of Miami, and Hector had was getting together with a friend named Danny, who he hadn't seen Danny for quite a while, for a number of years, and so they're getting together to and they're wondering where they should go. So Hector says, let's just go over to the Biltmore golf course and walk around. So he drove over there, and they just started catching up on everything that had happened to both of them in their lives. They're walking along, and they're lost in conversation, and they're at the 9th hole when suddenly they both stop. Now I want to quote Hector here. I clearly felt the eerie sensation of a large hand slipping inside my head, just behind my face, and pressing against my brain. At the same time, the back of my head felt like it was burning. He said he never in his life experienced anything like that. And he and Danny had both stopped simultaneously when he felt that. And Danny said, I can't go any further. I'm seeing all kinds of sparks inside my eyes. So they realized that they both had experienced something, but they were distinct sensations. And that's when Hector noticed this dense wall of fog that was about 300 feet away between two trees. It was about 40 feet wide, 15 feet high. And he lived in Florida all his life, and it just wasn't the right environment for that was conducive to fog. So that was unusual. And so this wall of fog starts rolling away from the trees and down this hill towards them. It was snaking towards them, and they started walking backwards. And the fog was about 100 feet from them when it stopped, and then retreated back to the trees where they had first seen it. And they were trying to figure out what this fog was about, and they were confused by it. And then the fog suddenly starts coming forward again from the trees, moving towards them. And so they're walking backwards, watching the fog as it rolls towards them. And it has perfectly curved edges, and it just is moving towards them.
It felt threatening.
Right, yeah, and they felt threatened, and it got closer than before. There was no dissipation at all. It could have gone in a number of different directions, but it was coming right towards them. And were moving back walking back fast, and then it stopped again and started drifting back the direction that had come. And so Hector said, listen, and he noticed there was no sounds of any animals, no birds. Everything was perfectly quiet, no crickets. There was no wind, just silence. And they were both baffled by what was going on. And then suddenly at that moment, they hear this high-pitched screech that just tore through the night. It was coming from about like 300 yards to the south. And it was a sound that had a kind of a electronic tinge to it, but it was a mix of biological and electronic sounds that had merged as one, and then it abruptly stopped. But after a few seconds, there was another screech sounding to the east this time, and this one was closer, then another and another, until there were almost no breaks between these screeches. It was 300 yards to the south, then 100 yards to the east, 75 yards, 50 yards, 20 yards, and then the screech came right from underneath their feet in the very grass right underneath them. And so they kind of kicked the grass. There's no insects, there's nothing there that could be making that sound. And then they looked up, and there's the fog right in front of them, about 4 or 5 feet away, rolling towards it. And he said, it had tricked us. It was intelligent. And there it was, and they couldn't move, and they were engulfed by the fog. And Hector said it was as if a wall of electricity had struck him. He says, not like goosebumps or even chills from fear of the unexplained or unknown. It hurt. Even the fine hairs on my face and body were charged. And they felt like hundreds of needles were piercing my skin. And the fog was dense and almost liquid-like, and it moving in it felt surreal. And it felt like 1,000 eyes were watching him, sizing them up as it swirled around them. And then suddenly Danny screamed. He said he was blind. He couldn't see. The flash of lights that he'd seen earlier were happening again, but everything was just whited out. He couldn't see anything. And so Hector grabbed his arm and pulled him, and there was a building nearby, and they walked over towards it, and finally just about got out of the fog, but it was still right with them. And so he said aloud, "We are here with only peace and love in our hearts. We mean no harm. Let us be on our way." And then they got out to the main path, and the fog seemed to release them, and it backed away. And so then they said went back to Danny's car after that and sat in the car for a few minutes just talking about this experience and wondering what it was about. And then Danny looks up and said, and there is the fog again. It's coming through the fence and into the parking lot. And Hector turned down that car and tore out of there. and
so it was not only sentient, it was intelligent.
Yeah, very strange experience.
Yeah, you think? All right, listen, I've made the listeners twist in the wind long enough, and I'm sure that my email is filling up right now as people stopped during your Bermuda story earlier with the couple and the reincarnation. I need to ask this question because if I don't get this clarified now, I'm just going to have to answer this for the next 10 years as people listen to the archives. While you were telling the story, there was this kind of creepy sound. It sounded either like a kid in the background or a cat. Did you have an animal that was making itself known or a child making itself known while you were telling me that story?
Okay. We do have a cat. We have 2 cats. And one of them was at my feet, and she was meowing, but I didn't think it was very loud.
Yeah, I didn't hear it.
And then I heard a different sound that was not either cat.
Really?
Yeah, and it wasn't the dogs. I thought, is that somebody on Dave's end?
No, I'm
okay. I'm a little creeped out now.
I have my cats downstairs with my daughter to keep them away from me during recording because mine will stand here on the microphone meow, 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 and trying to take over the entire show. But when you guys get a chance to hear this episode back, I'd like you to email me and let me know if that, in fact, because sometimes, I'm going to be honest with you, sometimes it sounded like a kid calling to you guys. And other times I was like, no, I think that's a cat. And it happened quite a bit. So I'm glad that I'm not completely crazy, but I did hear a cat. And
We've
you guys
had something like that happen before on a podcast we did with Whitley Strieber. The strange thing is going on.
Yeah, on occasion we'll get some. And I have people that on a regular basis will send me audio clips and they're like, are you hearing the scream in the background? I have to listen. And sometimes it gives me the willies. We did an interview with Betty Andreessen.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure.
Right. And she and her husband. And while we were talking, and they were talking about something about her husband and this entity or this aliens didn't seem to like him. While they're talking, I had to stop him immediately on air and go, I'm sorry, did you just say something to him while he was telling his story? And she said, no, I've just been sitting here silent. And we went back, and I heard it live on the air that night. Tim went in and pulled the audio, and you hear this female voice say, I'm going to kill him.
Really?
Yeah. And I played it back for him. He's like, well, thanks for that, Dave.
Oh, my God.
What is it, Betty Andreessen Luca now or something like that? I'm trying to remember the name. But, yeah, so we've had some creepy experiences on the show doing this from time to time, and I got to be honest with you, because I have a cat. I'm familiar with the noise, but it was still putting up what little hair I have on my head was standing up while I was listening to your story, hearing this. So that sounded really creepy. So for most of you that are going to send me these emails, it was probably just the cat. If they get back to me,
we'll listen and let you know.
Yeah, if they get back and tell me it's not the cat, you all need to drink holy water and turn off your radios and have them blessed. All right. Speaking of animals and pets, let's talk about the retired veterinarian. This is kind of a fascinating story. Can you enlighten us on oh, wait, no, wait, before we do that.
Wait, let me just tell you this one story.
Yeah, you have a backup story, right?
Okay. It's another fog story.
Another fog story, okay.
Yes, there was Bruce Gernon's fog when he was flying. There was Hector's fog on the golf course. And while we were writing this book, we were just finishing it up, we got an email from this woman who lives in Pembroke Pines, which is south of where we live. And she said, I'm a 70-year-old grandmother living in Pembroke Pines, Florida, and several years ago, I experienced this exact same thing with the fog while traveling to the Keys to pick up donated baby quilts. I have my son and husband as witnesses, but most everyone looks at me as just a little touched when I tell this story. Now, she was going from Big Pine Key to Isla Morada. It's a distance of 58 miles, more or less. Now, in the Keys, there's one road. It's 2 lanes. It's very slow going because they're just 2 lanes, and the only time you can pass is when they take the road up onto an embankment. Okay, and it usually takes more than an hour to get that 58 miles. All right. So she says, I traveled through time in my car while going from Big Pine Key to Islamorada, taking less than 15 minutes to travel a 58-mile trip. I can still feel the terror as I came over the bridge to see our hotel, knowing it wasn't possible to be there yet. I had traveled through a very dense fog for just about 1 mile, and as it dissipated, she came over this bridge. She says, I will be so happy to read your book and see if others have had the same or similar experiences. And then she describes that when she walked into the hotel room, her husband and son weren't expecting her because she got back too soon. And she was hysterical. And her first words were, I just traveled through time. And then she started to cry. I was shaking so hard my legs had almost not let me get out of the car and climb the stairs to our room. My husband and son were staying in the hotel while I drove to Big Pine and picked up the quilts. And then after she told her husband, after she calmed down and told him what had happened, he says, please tell me you're not going to have to go on Oprah. But, I followed this up. I got kind of a creepy sense from this story because what she said next. She said, the following day I had a very large dark bruise on the inside of my arm, about 2.5 inches across, shaped like a perfect donut with a perfectly untouched center, but painless. This experience was something that has stayed with me for all these years. My son and family still tease me about it, but it wasn't so funny at the time. I still wonder where I went. And I said to her, because I got my creepy spider sense, I said, do you think you were abducted? And she said, I've always thought that abduction might be an explanation for what happened that night and for this strange mark on her arm. I even contacted a hypnotist, but chickened out. This is my one and only trip through time, but I still get a little uneasy whenever my husband and I drive to the Keys for some downtime, and I relive that particular experience. So, now this is fog on Earth, just like Hector, golf course, bridge.
Right, and for any of our listeners, if you've had an experience with this kind of electronic time travel fog or feeling like the fog, and not just like you were stoned and thinking the fog was coming for you. I mean, I want to know if you really feel like you've had a creepy experience with a sentient version of fog. Email me, dave@darknessradio.com. It may be featured in an upcoming episode of Theater of the Mind. That's creepy. Yet another reason to not go outside. And especially in Florida. Like I didn't have enough reasons to not go outside in Florida. You have just added one more reason to that list. With all the craziness going on there, when we do our True Crime Tuesday show, I now understand why you have so many goofy people in your state. They're being infected by electronic fog. That's got to be it.
There are a lot of strange things that happen in Florida. I have to admit.
Oh, I know. We talk about it on a weekly basis on our True Crime Tuesday show. I laugh about it because we pull all the dumb crimes we can find for the week. And 90% of them are Florida man or Florida woman. And it's just amazing that you have anybody that hasn't been incarcerated in your state at this point. Oh, good grief. All right, let's dip into your veterinarian story here with this interdimensional beings. What is this story?
Well, we first came, how did we meet her? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Maybe in a spaceship, I'm not sure.
She must have come to the blog, maybe, and then
and contacted us and said that she had been having alien contact for at least 20 years.
And then we met her at a restaurant near Lake Okeechobee.
Right, met her and her husband.
Yeah.
And, we don't often get a chance to meet these people. I mean, we try to, but if we're separated by distance or something, sometimes it's just not possible. But she lives on the west side of Florida, and we live on the east, so we met midway across the state.
And some of these people we don't really. Maybe it's best not to meet them. But this is a professional woman, a veterinarian. So I thought, well, she likes animals. So
she was a dog person. So I thought, okay, you're gonna be okay. So we met her and her husband for lunch, we exchanged some.
So if this was a cat lady, there'd be no way you'd do that. Is that what you're
saying? No, we have cats too, but we have cats and dogs. So we don't discriminate.
Because as a Minnesota cat lady, I would have been offended.
But anyway, we met her and her husband about midway across the state. Spent about, 4 hours talking about her various experiences. And her stuff is very different, like from some of the other abduction cases we've talked about. Her name is Sandy Simmons. That's not her real name. And her experiences are uplifting and don't seem to involve actually seeing aliens.
Okay.
But involves hearing them.
No, she sees them too.
Yeah, she does, but not like, say, Connie did. You know, you see these grays standing around with guns or anything like that.
Well, it's her experiences. We call the chapter Alien Light. We have a chapter called Alien Dark, which has some really dark alien stories. But she actually enjoys meeting these creatures, these interdimensional creatures, and looks forward to it and sets aside time in the afternoon where she meditates and lays on her bed, and sometimes they come and she knows they're there when the bed starts moving like waves underneath her.
And the way they explain themselves to her, they say that they exist as waves. She exists as a particle. And it's quantum physics. So what they're trying to do is to teach her how to become a wave sometimes, and then they teach themselves to become particles so that they can interact at a quantum level. Except that she actually feels, when they're working on this energy with her, she feels it. They touch her feet. They massage her head, her shoulders.
Wow, sign me up.
Yeah, really, I know. Give me a massage.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they look like insects.
Yeah. That's
I can live with that. A foot massage, you could look like a shaved monkey. I don't care.
7 foot tall praying mantis hanging over your bed.
That'd be a little...
Might be a little intimidating, yes, all right. Just stick with the feet there, praying mantis friend.
But she has kept really copious journals on this for, 20 years. And for a while, during her first marriage, her husband, who was also a veterinarian, experienced some of this, but he completely freaked out, and they eventually got divorced. So he won't talk about it.
So, but she had good experiences, she feels.
Well, I think, she does have good experiences. I think the reason her husband freaked out because this was just so foreign to his left brain mindset.
Sure.
Whereas she has more of a right brain, artistic gardening type side,
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
She's more open.
All right. Let's talk about, since we're in the world of aliens, let's talk about this frightening alien abduction story that you have too, in the book.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that Alien Dark?
Yeah.
With the humans in the lab coats.
Right. Yeah. Let me get to that here. So I have some reference. Okay.
I know your head must swim with all the stories you.
Yeah, it's hard to remember all this stuff.
Yeah. And this is the first interview we've done on this book too. After we've done a few, we have it all together.
We hope.
Well, thanks for cutting your teeth with us here on Beyond the Darkness. We appreciate it. You two kids, just keep it up, and you're going to hit it really successful someday.
Okay. This is a French-Canadian man named Maurice who contacted us because we had been on a radio show that he had tuned into, and we were talking at that time about our
Aliens in the Backyard.
Book Aliens in the Backyard that was out, and which featured a French-Canadian man in Quebec who had a very eerie experience and had a very emotional reaction to his experience, and that we had written quite extensively about on our blog and getting his reaction. Anyhow, so Maurice emailed us afterwards, and he had never contacted anybody else or knew of any other French Canadians who had had any experiences like this. They began for him in 1975 when he was 5 years old. His mother was pregnant, and his his parents had sent him and his sister to their grandparents, and that's where the first incident occurred. He recalled playing in the basement on this tricycle, and he looked out the window and saw 6 gray metallic boots and tight metallic pants covering very skinny legs. And it was dark
outside.
It was dark outside, yeah. And suddenly he was just covered by a milky white light, and he didn't remember anything else. And to this day, he is still afraid to go down that basement. And he just shifts into a panic mode just at the thought of it. But so when he contacted us, he had just had his most recent encounter a few days earlier, and that was January 26, 2013, with the experience. And he was in bed next to his wife, and she was fast asleep when just after midnight, his lower body lifted from the bed, and he woke up. Then my upper body lifted up, he said, so that I found myself completely suspended in the air over my bed, and my wife was sound asleep. I couldn't move. I was thinking, you son of a bitch, leave me alone. I'm not in the mood for this crap tonight. Then he was flung like a whip to the door of the room. My head was pointed at the floor where a small, pale-skinned humanoid with large eyes and a large head was standing. There was maybe an inch between my nose and his face. That's when a voice in my head said, "I own you."
Can you imagine? I would have had a heart attack at that.
Whoa. I own you.
Own you. And he said, that's all I remember. When I realized I was back in my bed, I looked at my clock and it was 2:20. So it was like 2 hours later. And he says, I have memories of such activities throughout my life.
And the next morning, his wife comments that she never had such a great night's sleep.
And she suffers from sleep apnea and wakes up all the time. But that night she was totally out. And he never has spoken to anybody about these experiences except to his wife, and she just thought that he had a fertile imagination, but she didn't know what to think about them.
And then he heard us on Coast to Coast, and that kind of gave him a little bit of courage.
Right,
because it had happened to another French Canadian.
Yeah, and one time when he was 8 or 9, he woke up one night at about 2 a.m. and felt an urge to go to the dining room. And once he was there, he looked out this large bay window and saw a red dot in the sky. And the dot grew larger until it was like a big sphere, and then a beam of light shot from this object and lifted him up. And he says, I recall seeing the window getting closer and closer to me. I was bracing for the impact of smashing into the window, and just like that, I floated through the window towards this red sphere. The next thing I remember, I was in the basement. So I walked back to my room, and the clock said 3:30. My mom woke up and asked me why I was awake. I just looked at her and didn't say a word. I had and still have today this feeling of helplessness. But
I'd be in a rubber room.
I still haven't gotten to the really unusual story here that
we haven't gotten to the unusual story? You guys might be a little jaded. I don't mean to be rude here, but if you haven't gotten to the unusual story yet, you might need a little bit of therapy.
Okay, in 1994, when Maurice was 25, he moved to Austria to learn German and polish his skills in downhill ski racing. So he wanted to race in the FIS World Cup, the top international circuit of alpine skiing, and he needed to improve his world ranking. So he lived in a small town called Zell am See in central Austria, not far from the city of Salzburg. And so one night in January, he woke up at 2 a.m. feeling terrified and overwhelmed by a sense of impending doom. His blinds were closed, but suddenly the room was inundated with white light. The next thing he remembered, he was pinned to a vertical table in what looked like an underground cavern with rocky walls and ceiling. And there were other people who were also strapped to tables in the room, and they all appeared to be unconscious. So I'm quoting him now, men in lab coats and small, milky, beige-colored beings were moving about. Two men with weapons were standing not far from me, and one of the little bastards was right in front of me. A voice in my head said, "You are not to speak of this to anyone." I felt my head being pushed down my chin and driven into my chest. I felt the back of my neck being stretched to its limit. I promise, I won't tell anybody. The next thing I remembered, he was back in his bed, and it was 3:30 a.m. So a couple months after Maurice told us his story, I emailed him and asked if he'd had any more contacts with the beings. And his answer was very terse. "Please do not contact me again. After I told you my story, I started receiving telephone calls from all over the world, distant places that I've never been and I don't know anyone. When I answered, they would just they would just hang up and disconnect the call. Maybe it was a warning, I don't know, but I am saying nothing more. Sorry." And that was it.
All right, yeah, that was a good one. That was weirder at the end. Yeah, this is. Do you ever get the creeps when you get these stories?
Oh, yeah.
Do you ever look at them and go, I don't know if we want to share this one, and what if we open it up to them coming after us?
One summer, Rob had to go up to Minneapolis to see his mom. And our daughter was already living in Orlando. And I said, I can't stay in this house by myself. After we'd been doing these alien stories, I got so freaked out I had to sleep in the living room with the dogs and the cats.
All right, let's talk about the Ghostbuster in St. Augustine, Florida, as we start to wrap up the show here this evening.
Okay, yeah.
And when you're doing these stories, do you pick, we should have one ghost, one alien, one monster, one, time travel fog?
The ones that really hit us.
Yeah, we wanted to get ones that, that there were stories that people had told us that, you're not going to read anywhere else. You're not going to say, "Oh, I heard that story years ago." These are stories that are, ones that are people have never told these stories to.
It's not like we're taking stories that other people have written.
Right. And let's see here. Just a second. I'm getting close.
Is there any aspect of this that, I don't know, Trish, that any of the different aspects of the paranormal that you kind of raise an eyebrow to say, you know what, I'll buy all of this, but these kind of stories just don't fit my paradigm?
Truthfully?
No, lie to me.
I write fiction. I write fiction. So when I hear stuff like this, I think, ooh, how can I use this in a novel? So no, I get freaked out by some of this stuff, but, if people tell me a story, my impulse is to believe them. It's their experience. And who am I to doubt what they experienced? Yeah.
It's interesting that, some people have these very negative abduction experiences, and like Sandy has a positive experience, and there are a lot of people that, consider that these are positive experiences, and they're looking forward to, something major happening in the world.
So that was a cat.
Yeah.
No. Okay.
He's trying to jump up on the counter.
It's strange. He just jumped straight up in the air.
That's weird.
And I tend to have, my skepticism is on the friendly aliens because I've heard so many of the negative ones. But I'm hoping they're right, that there's the friendly ones, and they're watching out for us, and they're on our side. But I think that it's not one thing. It's not all negative demon-like beings or friendly. Or they call them star people. I think there are some of those that are here to help us, but I think there's some who are just neutral too. They're here for maybe harvesting whatever resources that we might have, and so it's a variety of possibilities. But we wanted to move into ghost busting.
Yeah, let's hear about this Ghostbuster in St. Augustine, Florida.
This is Connie Cannon. That's her real name.
Who's also an abductee.
Right, and she doesn't like the term ghost busting because she's very likes to distinguish between ghosts and spirits. And she says there's no such thing as ghost busting because ghosts are really just like photographic imprints that have no consciousness and that repeat the same thing over and over again. And you can't really get rid of those beings because they aren't conscious. It's the spirits that you can get rid of, and there are some that are demonic type spirits or negative beings that are here, and there's some that are not, and
just like the aliens.
And this particular, yeah, right. This particular story, interestingly, has both of them in it. So. The editor of she lives in St. Augustine, Florida, which St. Augustine has. You think of Florida as a place where people didn't really start moving till the 1950s or something, but actually the oldest city in the United States is St. Augustine, Florida. Goes back to the
1785, 1685, 1585. Yeah,
it's in the 1500s, the 16th century. So, and there's an old town that still exists there. In the central part, and it's a very big touristic place. But there's also a college near there, Flagler College, and this story involves a college co-ed, a young woman who lived in Old Town in an apartment, and she was having difficulties with beings, entities in that apartment. So she apparently had somehow contacted the St. Augustine newspaper about this and looking for help. And so the editor, who had occasionally contacted Connie about such stories, asked if she would investigate this haunting. So, as I said, it was a small apartment in the old town, and we'll call this young woman named Mary, we'll call her, and so
Melanie.
No, it says Mary.
Oh, here it says Melanie.
Really? Wow.
Nice editor. You better get on that.
Right. We've got two different versions of the same story. Okay, on the night of the intervention, it was during the Christmas holidays. It was raining and cold out. And when she spoke to Mary or Melanie, whatever it was, neither one of them is true. It doesn't matter. She asked her not to be home while she was working on this case, and that she would contact her later on. So when I arrived with my helper, we retrieved the key from under her mat and went inside. I make it a rule to never go to hauntings alone, but to take a trusted person with me who is on the same page and who can help me with cameras, tape recorders, candles, and to confirm or deny what I might see, hear, or feel. So Connie recalled that Mary had a small Christmas tree on a table, a wall bookcase filled with books, a rocking chair, and a couple of big floor cushions. And the living room was separate from a tiny kitchen area, and there was a small bedroom. And Connie had asked Mary to turn off all the lights, and so she and her friend entered with flashlights. I guess to make it a little more eerie, I don't know.
Yeah, really.
So inside, the first thing she noticed was a musky scent, and that she found unpleasant. And entities often give off odors of one kind or another, but this was incense. I had asked her not to use incense or scented candles that day, but she ignored the request, probably because it was covering up the odor of marijuana. So Connie stepped inside the apartment and stood perfectly still, eyes closed. Her senses were on high alert then as she waited for anything that might indicate a presence. I had an immediate sense of a confused spirit, but a benign one. However, I also sensed a very dark and hostile entity. My friend and I lit one of my candles, a purple one. So on the way to the apartment, Connie said she had called her otherworldly folks to accompany her and her friend, and that's an integral part of her routine, she says. And so she's looking for some support from the other side. So now as she listened, the old rocking chair started to creak.
And that would be creepy.
Yeah, but she said it wasn't all disturbing or frightful. But then there was a loud rapping on the walls, and something in the kitchen fell with a crash. So she moved further into the apartment and held the flashlight up to the bookcase, and it became quickly obvious to Connie from the titles that she scanned and the presence of black candles and a Ouija board that Mary was into the black arts, into black magic. And a Ouija board doesn't necessarily indicate a practitioner of dark arts, but when combined with other tools used in black magic, it's like indicative of such a practice. So I knew in this instance, this college student had brought some negative spirits into her living space. And I decided to leave and work remotely with those entities. However, that was when she noticed an old black man sitting in the rocker by the Christmas tree, and she could see him clearly. He looked to be from a distant era, and tears ran down his cheeks. When he spoke, she heard him clearly. He said that he and his son had lived in that space long, long ago. They were slaves, and the town people had accused his son of raping and murdering a white woman. His son was innocent and had run away with the posse chasing him. The pathetic old man was there waiting for his son. Suddenly, as Connie digested the story, the spirit of the son appeared and asked her to let his father know that he had been caught and was hanged on a huge oak tree in the yard of that house. And the son was this is a quote again, the son was in the light, and he was very much wanted his pa to join him. So when I conveyed the message to the old fella, describing his boy and telling him he was standing there, the old man wept, reached out both arms, and something unusual happened. The light enveloped both of them, and they were gone. I wept myself, so happy for an old man who had been trapped for more than a century waiting for his child. So
that's a good story.
Yeah.
Wow. This is and has been Beyond Strange. True Tales of Alien Encounters and Paranormal Mysteries, the new book by Rob and Trish MacGregor. The book is out and available right now, correct?
Yes.
All right, we'll have a link up to that so that you can order the book, and just find it when you go to podcast1.com and click on the Beyond the Darkness. You'll be able to find it there. And remember, any of the items that you use our Killer Deals link at podcast1.com, and then click on the Amazon Killer Deals link so that you can take advantage of buying books like this or the documentaries, toys, clothes, food, whatever you need from Amazon.com. And remember, a small percentage of those sales used through that link on our site will go a long way to help keep our show as commercial-free as we can make it and available to you 5 days a week. Rob, Trish, thank you again so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you, Dave. And please send us the link when it goes up.
We certainly will. You'll get
I want to hear that sound.
Yeah. Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't.
Maybe I don't.
We'll be back with you guys on Monday. And remember, next Saturday, not tomorrow, but next Saturday, I'm back hosting Coast to Coast AM, and we're going to be taking a look at another true crime scenario. We've got 2 true crimes we'll be investigating. One is the McDonald's massacre from 1984. You need to hear about this story. There's a lot that many of you did not even understand or know about, and we're going to talk about a wrongly convicted killer in the second part of the show. That's what we'll be doing next week on Coast to Coast AM. For Tim Dennis, I'm Dave Schrader. Thank you for listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.